In today's video, we will address some essential questions about the institution of civil government. Asking, thinking, and struggling with these questions will help us, over time, to develop a sound perspective on the proper role of government. Before we delve into this topic, it is good to understand that well-meaning people can disagree on what government should or should not do. But well-meaning people can be wrong. More significantly, however, we will discover the importance of being able to discern its proper role. In this video, we will be questioning the role of civil government. Before we do, we should first define civil government as well as identify the nature of government. First, civil government is a political institution that makes and enforces the laws of a society. The phrase enforces the laws is based upon the nature of government, which is force. Everything government does is always backed by the threat or act of violence, and this should not be a surprise. Imagine a cop capturing a burglar and then announces to the burglar that he will be brought to jail, but the burglar says he doesn't want to go to jail. Without the ability and authority to force the person into jail, the officer's orders would actually be mere suggestions. All government mandates, therefore, and laws would only be followed or made if a person felt like it. If you don't think this is true, try not paying your taxes. Now this brings us to the fundamental question of government, the fundamental question of political science. What is the purpose of government? Or asked in another way, what authority should government have? All authority? Complete, total? Authority to do anything they want? Should government have zero authority to do anything at all? Or should government have the authority to do some things, but not all things? Of these three options, which do you believe is the correct answer? Now, because over 99% of the people typically choose the third option, government should do some things, but not all things, we're going to go with that. I also believe that's probably the most consistent with Scripture. Next, we'll ask the question, okay, well, if government shouldn't do all things, and they shouldn't do just nothing, then what powers, what authority should government have? What powers and authority does government have? I'm sure it's a safe assumption, if you're working on this question with others, that the list you made is not necessarily the same as the list others made. And that may be because you have different standards and criteria that you use to determine what government should or should not do. And that brings us to our next question. How do you decide if a proposed government action is appropriate? How does one know what government should or should not do? I'm assuming none of you said government should have the authority, the power, to impose a religion on everyone. If that's the case, then why not? What criteria do you use to say if government forces a religion on another person, that would be an abuse of power or abuse of authority? Go ahead and answer that question for yourself. How do you decide if a proposed government action is appropriate? What answers, what standards can you come up with? There are several possible answers to that question, which is why we have so many political parties or people that have different thoughts and opinions as to what government should or should not do. Now, if you think civil government should be limited in some way, then one must know what government is allowed to do. Why? So government remains limited, and one must be able to identify when government wants to do something it is not supposed to do. So where should we look to determine the proper role of government? To determine or know what it may or may not do. Certainly, we must identify and apply standards based on good principles. But how do we discover these principles? We will discover these principles, and we will apply these principles in the area of government. And we're going to conclude this video with the first principle. We'll begin with one that we already addressed, and that is the nature of government is force. Now, why is it important to know when government wants to do something or is doing something it is not supposed to do? Because the nature of government is force. Everything it does is backed by the threat or use of violence. And knowing what government can and cannot do and having an appropriate standard for that helps us to keep it contained. Otherwise, it will grow and become tyrannical. Well, that concludes the first video. We're going to pick up and continue these ideas, these concepts, in the next video where we address the issue of power and authority. See you then.